Howdy folks, it's your friend Fish with Dom, and today I'm going to talk to you about wacky rigging. Now if you've shed any light on my writing, any light into my YouTube videos or my social media accounts, you know I love wacky rigging. This is something I've gotten into a couple of years ago and decided to share with you today what I use, where I use it, how I use it, and perhaps even a couple of stories of some fish I've caught in different locations. Now, wacky rigging looks incredibly easy because here's the kicker: it is. When I first started bass fishing about 10 years ago, this is when it started to really pick up in popularity throughout the professional bass tournaments, FLW and bass, whatever they were called back then. This is where it first originated. It looks so simple. I didn't fish with it just because it looked silly. Like, yes, it would catch fish, but I never gave it, the time of day because I thought it looked too simple to fish with, if that makes any sense. I was a big jig and crankbait fisherman back then. I still am. I still love my jigs. I still love my crankbaits. But this is a mainstay in my tackle box now. And if I can throw this in difficult situations, or if I could throw this on a day where I need a good bite, this is a bait I always have with me. When I started fishing with this, probably about 2010, it was an absolute game changer. It's a great follow-up bait. It's good in so many different situations. I've caught fish on it in rivers, in ponds, on the Great Lakes, in smaller inland lakes, in flowing rivers. It works for me. It really works for me. And if you haven't tried it, or if you haven't tried out some of these different worms at all that I'm about to share with you today, I highly recommend you doing so, because this stepped up my game incredibly. And all in all, wacky rigging puts fish in the boat. You can't argue that. Some days it catches all the fish, big and small. Some days you'll catch that kicker fish if you need. If you're catching them on buzzbaits all morning, but then it slowly died down and you need to throw something up into where they're hanging out, something very, very light, a very finesse presentation, a wacky rigged worm, just like this one right here, will always get the job done. Alright, so I'm going to go through a few packages of worms that I have right here, share with you how much they cost, where you can get them, and we'll take it from there. Now, you can call it what you want. You can call it a Senko worm, you can call it a cigar worm, you can call it a stick bait. They're all the same thing in my opinion. I believe the term Senko is a Gary Yamamoto trademark name for their worm, but they're all the same. This style of worm, the Gary Yamamoto, might be a little softer, it might be a little harder than either the Yum, the Bass Pro Shop, or the Berkeley imitator of their version of the worm. So right here I have the easy, the cheap ones. The Yum Dinger. Now, first off, this is the King Kong Dinger. If I want to catch a fish, but only a big fish, I'll only throw this a handful of times a year. This is the big ol' 7-inch dinger. This is the Big Jim. This'll catch fish. This'll fish deep. This is an incredibly large finesse profile bait. And not too many situations I find myself where I need to tie this on and give it a throw. But when those larger bass are hanging out pretty deep and they're pretty pressured, about anywhere at least 15 foot of water or so, I throw this at them, get the job done. Seldomly I'll toss this under dock, see if I can find a bigger boy hanging out. But all in all, as far as size goes, I don't fish with the 7 that often. I fish with the 4s a little bit, but most of the time it's the 5s. If you're at the tackle shop and they don't have the 5-inch worm, and you see the 5.5, it doesn't really make a difference. Just go for it. That's the size I recommend because it's more likely going to imitate a larger bait fish or whatever they're feeding on in that body of water. Brings me to the 3-inch Yum Dinger. You can find these at Walmart for $2.99 a package. You get, how many worms do you get in a package nowadays? You get 8 for $3. Not a bad setup. Not a bad setup. And if you can see that, the yums don't come scented, so I drop salt in there. That not only gives it its own scent, but that also covers the scent from my hands. So, more likely to have a fish hold on a little bit longer. I actually filmed a whole video about that topic, so I'll leave it in the comment section below. But all in all, here's what that Gary Yamamoto Senko has got. Got a nice little wobble to it, real soft bait. Catches fish. Very affordable bait. Catches fish all across the board. Gets the job done, plain and simple. So that's it for the yum. Let's go over to some of the best and the baddest on the market, in my opinion. The Berkeley Gulp 5-inch sinking minnow. I've got it right here in the white pearl, and then their green pumpkin with the red flake. Very, very scented baits. If you look in there, it's got a little bit of the Berkeley scent oil chilling at the bottom of the bag. Very, very porous bait. If you don't put these back in the bag, they shrink to probably an eighth of their size, and you got to get a pair of wire cutters to cut them off the hook. It's a lot more dense and harder of a bait. Got some good wiggle on both ends to it. It smells like gulp. This catches fish too. A little bit more expensive. A package of these goes about $5 or $6 for a bag where you get 10 worms in the count. If you're fishing with an expensive worm like the Berkeley Gulps or the Yamamoto Senkos, or even if you want to save your yum Senkos, I'd highly recommend getting the Wacky tool, and I'll show you what that is at the end here. So there's the Berkeley Gulps. If you've seen my Berkeley Power Bait unboxing video, I've got the Generals right here. This is Power Bait's version of the true stickworm. It doesn't look like a minnow, it looks like a worm. And it's got a similar bend. It's a lot more supple and soft than the Yamamoto Senko and the Yum Dinger Senko, now that I think of it. But it's a lot more dense, so I've got high hopes for this bait. I'm definitely going to be throwing it. It still has a lot of scent to it, so in certain situations, if the water's cold and you're throwing it and you need that extra charge for those bass to come in and really give it a yanking, the scent is really what sells it sometimes. Sometimes the extra scent means it's game over for the fish. You're going to pin them. The Max Scent General, $7 a bag, I believe. Nothing too terrible. And the Gulp 5-inch minnow, $6 a bag. They both catch fish. I've been fishing with these gulps for probably 6 years now. We used to have this rivalry in my neighborhood. Like, the kid down the street who fished with the Yum Dinger always thought he could outfish me with the Gulp sinking minnow. And we always went back and forth at it. But we both caught a lot of fish. Now let's go through some other baits. I like these worms a lot, what I'm about to show you, but they might not be around in the future. This is the Gander Mountain brand 5.5-inch stickworm. You know, it's the halfway bend between the Yum Dinger and the Berkeley Gulp 5-inch sinking minnow. This catches fish. They were very cheap, or at least when I bought them, because Gander Mountain went out of business last year. But Gander Worlds are starting to open up now because Gander Mountain got bought out by Camping World. So I bought a whole bunch of these at a craft show a couple of months ago. Somebody was selling, you know, a whole bunch of fishing gear, and they went out and took the remainder of Gander Mountain stock, and I got them. I fished with them last fall. I really liked them. So if you can find just discounted stick baits or Senko worms, give them a shot. Like, I got probably 25 worms for $2, if that, and caught some fish with them. It absolutely works, and you'll never know what works until you give it a shot. Now, another thing I'm going to show you real quick. Now, because if you're out there and you don't see a worm you quite like, or you have a color pattern that's only available for a certain company, but you don't like the worm, you can try making the worm yourself. My buddy Seth Flint out of Shepherd, Texas, he makes me a couple of homemade stick baits like this every so often. Plays with different colors. He'll send me a few of them here and there. If you're watching this, Seth, Thank you. I love these. I can't wait to fish with them. It's about -10 right now in Michigan, so we're going to have to wait until April or so. And what we have going on here, the stick bait mold is very, very common. It's all the same, just 5-inch or whatever size it may be, even worm. And you can make these anywhere. You can make these at your house. You can pay bait makers to make them in certain colors. And you could also decide whether or not if you want your plastic mix in them to be harder or softer. If you want a super soft bait, you could not add any hardener. You just add some softener. If you want it to be a little bit more stiff, put a couple of drops of hardener in there. When I get some soft bait pouring material in the future, I'll definitely film a video about that. But my buddy Seth makes these. You can holler at him on Twitter at Bassin_away. Dude catches fish. I've got so much respect for him for sending me these. But you can play around with different colors, and it's very, very affordable when you get your mold, you get your injector, you get the material, and you just start playing around with it, because some days it's going to take that one see-through odd-colored green to get them to bite. But other than that, you can have a field day with the plain Jane colors. It's a lot of fun making a bait and catching a fish on it. And last but not least, I've got some back here. About a year ago, I had a Bass Pro Shop Christmas card, and I went to the Bass Pro website, and I figured, what can I get for about $15 or so? Well, I ended up getting a large packet of the Bass Pro Shop Stick-O worms. That's stick-O. And it's Bass Pro Shop's version of the Senko worm. And I caught a lot of fish with it this year. It's very, it's a cheaper bait. It's not as nearly expensive as the Max Scent or the Gulps. I got a bag of probably 50 for $10. It was really cheap, but they were also on sale. But caught a lot of fish for me this year. I caught some of my fattest smallmouth of the year on this color. I don't know what the chartreuse tip does, but a lot of people really, really believe that makes a difference. So, how you fish a wacky rig? Put the hook through the middle. Tie it to a line. 9 times out of 10, I'm fishing this on a spinning outfit. And on the spinning outfit, light line. I keep it 10-pound or lighter. If I can get away with 6, that's what I'm going to throw. But as far as a braid or super line that I'm going to be using, I'll be using the Fireline 8-carrier braid in a 10-pound strength, but it's got a 4-pound diameter. It's very thin, it's very sensitive. I can cast it out there. Just the bare worm, cover a lot of ground with it. It might take me a while to cover, a certain stretch that might have multiple laydowns or work it in different areas, but I'm going to cover them very, very well with this bait, and that's where it really, really shines. You can cover some water with it. It might take a little bit of time, but you're really, really going to cover it, because this is a slow way to fish. 9 times out of 10, once this bait hits the water, those fish are going to hit it while it's falling and shimmying through the water. And every single worm I've shown you today, and every single worm on the market, they all fall just a little bit differently. Some will go side to side. Some of them will bow like this, and the tail ends will dance just like that. Some of them will rock forward. Some of them will do the sweeping action. Fish hit it on the fall. I'm not even kidding. This is why I love fishing bright colored braids like the Fireline or the Suffix 832. If I can get it in a bright color, I do so, because I'll run my Fireline, if I'm not running a straight fluorocarbon, I'll run the Fireline to a fluorocarbon leader so the fish don't see it. Ultra finesse presentation to them. That Fireline, because it's so bright, I can have, some slack in my line, and when those fish pick it up on the fall and start moving with it, I'll see it in my line, so I won't even feel the fish, but I could see my line starting to move, and I could jack a hook set into them. It'll get the job done, and it's been working for me for several years now. Now, there are a lot of different worms on the market. I'm not going to say one's better than another. That's very, very subjective to say, and I feel like that'd be an easy YouTube video to make. So I figured I'm just going to share with you a whole bunch of knowledge about them. So those are the worms I use. And this is how I fish with a Senko worm wacky rigged. For the more expensive worms, I will use something called the Wacky tool. Now, I filmed a YouTube video on how to use this a year ago, but I'm going to run through it again right now. I'm going to take this sticko worm, pull that hook out, and I take my worm out of the package, put it into this end pipe of the Wacky tool, and I'll put it about halfway in. If you're a little off, that's okay. Don't worry about it. And I'm going to take one of these O-rings down here and just slide it up the pipe and up onto the worm. Try to get it as close to half as possible. If not, you can always adjust it later. You just slide her on up, just like that, until she's on there. Now if we look at the worm, that O-ring's just a little to my left, so I'm going to slide her down just a hair to where she's just like that. Now because you're hooking directly into the middle of this bait with such a meaty hook, and you're putting a lot of force on the interior of such a small diameter bait, it can rip very, very easy. With some companies, I've noticed you can get 1, maybe 2 fish per worm if you rig them like that. So what I do with the Wacky tool, like a lot of people do, I'll take the hook after I have that O-ring on there, and I won't just put it underneath this O-ring, I'll skin hook it too, so it really stays on there, not going anywhere. And just like that, I have the hook in line with the worm, so if it's coming through the water, it's going to look like that. When I first saw this, I was expecting the hook rate ratio to be dramatically lower. It turns out it isn't. I still catch fish with it. I still give them the extra second to really chop it down. Even though this is a 5.5 inch worm, I've caught plenty of 10-inch fish on it, and I've caught plenty of 20-inch fish on it. I've caught some smallmouth pushing 6 pounds with it. When the hook's like that, they're still going to get pinned because it's pretty easy for them to put this whole worm in their mouth, because when they attack it, they attack the middle of it, and then they suck it in from there. Then you've got a little bit to set that hook, drive it home, and get that fish in the boat. Now, there are 2 different kinds of O-rings. There's a standard O-ring like this, and then there's the other O-ring style where there's 2 O-rings to a bit. There's one on the left side, one on the right side, and there will be this rubber bridge connecting the 2 of them. And then you would hook underneath that bridge to where your hook point would be offset from the worm. I haven't fished with those yet. I really want to. But all in all, if it's an affordable bait, I've got no problem throwing it straight in the middle. But if I'm running low, if I'm going to the river and I only have a handful and I really want to save them, I don't feel like running to the tackle shop, I'll rig them just like this. It'll get the job done for me. It still catches fish. When they hit this, they don't just hit the tail. They engorge it. They just a big old swallow from beyond. So that's how I fish with the Wacky tool. Now the hooks I use for wacky rigging, these are finesse wide gaps, and I fish the 1/0 or the 2/0 hook from Gamakatsu, and they get the job done for me. Sometimes I'll fish a little bit bigger, sometimes I'll fish a little bit smaller, depending on the size of the worm. If it's the 5-inch, give or take a little bit, use the 1/0 or the 2/0. If I'm fishing the 3 in really, really pressured situations, say it's 100 degrees out and they're under a dock and I want to throw them something nice, small and bite size, I'll throw them the 3-inch worm, but I'll put that on a 1/0 finesse wide gap hook. If I'm throwing that 7-incher, I'm putting it on a 4/0, maybe even a 5/0. Just something really, really big, really meaty to dive down into the plastic when I hook it. So the Gamakatsu finesse wide gap or the Berkeley Fusion finesse wide gap, solid worm as well. Those are the only 2 wacky rigging hooks I've really given a shot over the past couple of years. All in all, Sharp points, they hold up very well. They pierce the cartilage and they get through bone pretty good too. So when you're fishing deep, you've got some good line. You know they've taken it. You can really power these hooks and that Senko into the bass's mouth. And largemouth, smallmouth, spotted bass, silver bass, wacky rigging catches all sorts of fish. I fish them in laydowns, deep current, rivers. There's so many different ways you could fish with them. And something I haven't actually done all too much, but I'm going to this year, you can get special wacky rigging jig heads. So the premise of this jig head weighs probably a little under quarter of an ounce, probably 3/16. Got a little weed guard on it. This allows you to fish this presentation just like this at great depths quickly. It's a little too quick for me. Normally, I'm used to casting out in 20 foot of water and letting it take a minute to get down there. With this, it goes straight down there. You can move it all day and night. It's still gonna constantly be falling just like that. It's like a jig with a wide swimming profile behind it. I've given it a little bit of a shot, but on some days and in some major current, like on the St. Clair River or the St. Lawrence River, a lot of guys use these, to battle the current, to get action, to stay kind of deep, to really show off to the fish. Some people swear by them. I haven't had too much luck with them, but this is something I'm gonna definitely try out next year. Once Old Man Winter leaves, am I right? Okay. I catch fish in 2 feet of water with these up under docks. I'll catch fish in 30 feet of water out on Saginaw Bay, shipping channels, slips in harbors. I fish them everywhere. There's been a lot of debate online whether or not the wacky rig imitates a minnow or some sort of creature. Some people say it imitates a crawdad, flashing its craws around, swimming through the water. Whatever it is, it catches fish. I'll say that once and I'll say it again. It catches fish. I fished them in incredibly clear water up on Torch Lake in northern Michigan, Lake St. Clair, Lake Okeechobee, Peachtree Lake in northern Georgia. The wacky rig worm catches fish. There are different baits you can wacky rig, but I personally don't believe any of them work as well as a stick bait, just because the stick bait is so versatile, and there's so many different actions you could get out of every single individual worm. It's mind-blowing when you think about it. All in all, around timber, underneath dams, on rivers. Earlier this year I was fishing on the Saginaw Bay, and I was just throwing up towards these docks, and we really weren't catching anything. The wind kicked up, we kind of got blown off a little bit, so we're just kind of, mumbling and pumbling around, and I ended up catching probably a 5-pound smallmouth, just throwing that, off the point, up into docks where everybody's been fishing for the past couple of hours. Sometimes it takes that one finesse presentation to just do it to catch a fish. And that day, that was it. Most definitely. That was probably a 5-pound fish. I've caught a lot of fish deep, a lot of fish shallow. In a local river, actually, I'm going to try to film myself fishing it pretty soon here. I would find river cuts where smallmouth bass are going to be hiding in the current. Most of the river will be about 6 inches deep, but then the areas where they can break away from the current, where it's about 2 foot up underneath the shoreline or behind some rocks, I'll cast the Senko worm upstream. I won't run a weedless hook on them all too often unless I'm really fishing grass, but around rocks I can get away with it. I'll throw the worm upstream, work it back, and drift it right into their hole and just wait. I'll give it 2 or 3 drifts, and if I can't get it done and then, they're probably not going to touch it if there's a fish there. Because most of the time I can sight fish them in there. This is a great sight fishing bait as well. The wacky rig worm does it all. If you haven't fished with it, or you need to fish with it, do it. Like right now. If you have open water, give it a shot right now. I've caught fish in March doing it. I've caught fish in December doing it. Fish it high, fish it deep, fish it fast, fish it slow. I catch a lot of fish doing it. Around rocks especially. Man, oh man. Caught all sorts of things throwing that old worm around. Catfish, I've caught some pike. Caught a walleye or two doing it. My buddy Andy caught a tagged walleye throwing this on Lake St. Clair one time. That was pretty interesting. So if you're fishing in highly pressured bodies of water, or if it's the dog days of summer, throw this. This bait, you know, it makes a difference as far as catching, you know, really working for 2 fish a day or getting a respectable 5 in some certain conditions. It fishes a little bit slower, but it fishes very well in little areas. I'll take my time when I'm working laydowns, when I'm fishing ledges with it, if I'm throwing it out on drop-offs. It's a great bait to throw also when you're kind of tired, when you want to take a break, when you want to cast on out there, drink your coffee a little bit, check your phone, move your rod tip a little bit as that worm's shimmying. It's fishing for you. It works. There's no wrong way to fish with them. They catch fish. Now, if you have any stories of wacky rigging or products you recommend for wacky rigging, there are many different worms out there you can use. Let me know what I should try out this season. Drop me a comment below, and I'll try to get back to you and see about those. But until then, thank you for watching Fishing with Dom. I appreciate you for viewing this video, and I really appreciate it if you've made it this far. Thank you to everybody who helped make all these possible. Couldn't have done it without you. You're watching Fishing with Dom. Take care.